Let me tell you something most people don't realize until it's too late. When you have someone who's loyal, who shows up for you, believes in you, stands by you even when it's hard, that's not normal, that's not common, that's rare. But the tragic part, some people only realize what they had after they've broken it. He thought your loyalty meant you'd always stay. That no matter how little effort he gave, you'd keep loving him. But now, you're gone. And that same heart he treated like it was replaceable is the one he's losing sleep over. This is what happens when someone breaks a loyal heart. And this is what it looks like when regret starts breaking them. When someone offers you their loyalty, they're handing you something incredibly rare, something they didn't have to give. Loyalty isn't automatic. It's not a given, and it certainly isn't a guarantee. It's a choice. And it's not just about staying physically present. It's about emotionally showing up consistently, even when things get hard. It's about standing beside someone not because it's convenient, but because you believe in who they are, even when they're not at their best. That's what you gave him. You showed up when you could have walked away. You listened when he didn't have the words. You stayed when you could have chosen yourself. And that kind of loyalty, it's powerful, but he didn't see it. See, the problem is that when someone gets used to your loyalty, they begin to mistake it for permanence. He started believing you'd always be there. He assumed that no matter how distant, inconsistent, or careless he became, your love would remain a constant. Like background music he could ignore until the silence hit. He didn't realize that loyalty is like trust. Once you break it, it doesn't just snap, it shatters. And rebuilding it isn't about words or apologies, it's about actions and consistency over time. But he never got that far, because by the time he noticed what he had, you were already gone. What he didn't understand was that loyalty has limits. It has boundaries. You can be loyal, but not to your own detriment. You can love someone deeply, but you still owe yourself respect. And at some point, the most loyal thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who doesn't value what you bring. You reach that point. You realize that loyalty doesn't mean staying in a place where you're unappreciated. It doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And when you finally left, not out of anger, but out of clarity, something shifted. That's when regret crept in. Because regret doesn't always show up immediately. It shows up in the quiet. In the moments where he reaches for his phone and remembers you're not there anymore. It shows up when he goes through something hard and instinctively thinks of you, but you're no longer the safe place he once took for granted. That's the moment it hits. You weren't just someone who loved him. You were someone who chose him every day with patience, with loyalty, with heart. And he realizes he didn't just lose a person. He lost someone who never had to love him, but did anyway. Now, he's starting to understand that loyalty isn't replaceable, that it doesn't come around twice in the same way. You didn't love him because he earned it. You loved him because that's who you are. But he had a responsibility to protect that love. And he didn't. He mishandled something sacred. And now he's left with the weight of knowing he had something extraordinary and treated it like it was ordinary. That's the thing about loyalty. It's a gift. And gifts come with responsibility. When someone gives you their trust, their heart, their loyalty, it's not your right to keep. It's your job to protect. And when that's broken, the guilt doesn't go away easily. He may try to distract himself, move on, convince himself it wasn't that serious. But deep down, he knows. He knows he broke the kind of heart people spend a lifetime hoping to find. And that realization, that's what's breaking him now. You're absent. There's something people don't understand until they've already lost it. You don't realize how much light someone brought into your life. You're standing in darkness without them. When he had you, when your presence was a constant, he got used to the warmth you offered. Your love, your care, your emotional availability, it was always just there. It was in the good morning texts, the check-ins, the encouragement when he doubted himself. the loyalty even when he didn't deserve it. And over time, that presence began to feel like background noise. Consistent, expected, almost invisible in its reliability. He didn't even notice it was light. Until it was gone. What happens next is always the same. At first, he feels a kind of freedom. He doesn't fully register the shift. Maybe he even believes he'll be better off. But slowly, and then all at once, the absence starts to speak. It shows up in the small, quiet moments. When no one checks in on him after a long day. When he can't share a random thought and know someone out there will actually care. When his wins don't feel as fulfilling because he doesn't have that one person who would have celebrated him like no one else could. That's when he starts to notice the light is missing. That's when the darkness becomes real. It's easy to overlook what someone brings into your life when you've never had to imagine your world without them. That's what happened with you. You gave so much, so often, without asking for anything loud in return. You were steady, emotionally generous, supportive. And because you didn't demand recognition every time you showed up, he started to believe that's just how love works. That it should come easy, that it would always be there. But love like yours isn't easy. It takes strength to be consistent. It takes emotional maturity to be patient, kind, forgiving. And now that you're not there to hold that space, he feels it. Every day, there's a loneliness that hits differently when it's not just about being alone. It's about being without you. Because being without a person who truly saw you, who chose you even on their hardest days, creates a void nothing else quite fills. He can be surrounded by people, noise, distractions, but it won't compare to the peace you brought. The energy you gave, that light you carried, often without anyone even noticing you were doing it. Now, regret has started creeping in through the cracks, not just because he lost you, but because he finally understands what he had. That's the part people rarely talk about. Regret doesn't always come from the moment they lose you. It comes from the moment they realize what you were. And that realization is painful. It's not just guilt, it's mourning. Mourning the version of life they could have had if they had just treated you better, if they had appreciated the light while it was still shining on them. But now the room is dark, and no one else walks in with the same energy. No one else loves with the same depth. He's realizing that you weren't just good. You were rare. And rare isn't something you stumble across again just because you want to. That's the pain he's sitting with now. The realization that the light he once ignored was the very thing keeping his world from feeling so cold. He didn't just lose someone who loved him. He lost someone who illuminated him, who saw his potential even when he didn't, who made the heavy days feel lighter. And now that light is gone. And the darkness, it's not just around him, it's inside him. Because once you've had that kind of light, every shadow reminds you of what you lost. Regret is a powerful thing. It doesn't always hit like a storm. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, quiet, steady, unavoidable. And more often than not, it comes long after the damage is done. What he's feeling now isn't just sadness or longing. It's regret. And it's sharp because it's tied to something deeper in disrespect. When someone breaks the heart of a person who gave nothing but love, loyalty, and care, regret becomes the price they pay, not just for losing the person, but for how carelessly they handled what was never theirs to mistreat. In the beginning, he didn't see it that way. Maybe he thought it was normal to pull away emotionally, to stop putting in effort, to become distant or dismissive. Maybe he told himself you were asking too much, being too sensitive, needing more than he could give. But deep down, he knew. He knew there was a part of him that stopped showing up the way he should have. He knew you were giving more than you were receiving. And still, he kept taking. That's where the disrespect starts. Not always with cruelty, but with indifference. With choosing silence when words were needed. With choosing absence when presence mattered most. He might not have yelled or cheated or caused chaos. Sometimes, the most painful kind of disrespect is quiet. It's when someone stops trying, stops caring, stops noticing the effort you're making. And you held on, longer than most would. You made excuses for his behavior, tried to be understanding, gave him the benefit of the doubt. You stayed loyal to someone who wasn't showing up for you in the same way. And he didn't stop you. Because part of him believed you'd always stay. But now, that belief has shattered. Now that you're gone, now that your energy is no longer flowing his way, he's starting to feel the weight of what he lost. Not just you, but the way you made him feel about himself. The way you always believed in him, even when he was hard to love. And that's where the regret hits hardest, when he realizes you loved him at his most unlovable. And in return, he made you question your own worth. That kind of regret doesn't fade overnight. It doesn't get solved with a new relationship or a few weeks of space. Because it's not just about missing you. It's about the version of himself he now has to live with. The version that let someone loyal slip away. The version that didn't rise to the level of the love he was given. That's what haunts people. Not just that they lost someone, but that they weren't better when they had the chance. You see, when you give your heart to someone with depth, honesty, and consistency, it becomes part of their world. And when they damage that gift, they don't just lose you, they lose a piece, of warmth, of goodness that they may not find again. He's realizing that now. And the pain he's feeling isn't just about what's gone, it's about what he failed to protect. The regret isn't random. It's earned, it's dense, it's the emotional cost of breaking something that was built on trust. And here's the truth that people don't regret losing what they didn't care about. They regret losing what they were too blind to appreciate. That's the kind of regret that lingers. Because once they wake up to what they did, they also wake up to the reality that it's too late to undo it. And all that's left is the weight of knowing they hurt someone who only ever wanted to love them right. There's a certain kind of silence that hurts more than words ever could. It's the silence that follows someone's absence, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. That's what he's facing now. When he had you, he got used to the sound of your presence, the way you cared, the way you checked in, the way you offered love without being asked. Your words were always there to soothe him, encourage him, challenge him when needed. You filled the space with meaning, with connection, with warmth. And now, that space is empty, and the silence left behind is louder than anything you ever said. The truth is, most people don't realize how much noise love makes. Not the chaotic kind, but the quiet consistency of someone who's truly there for you. When you love someone, you're woven into the rhythm of their life. Your texts, your voice, your laughter, your support, they become a part of their everyday experience. But when they lose you, they don't just miss the big moments. They miss the small, constant hum of your presence. And when all of that stops, what's left is silence, and it's deafening. He might have thought that things would go on the same, even if he pulled back. Maybe he thought your heart would wait, that your loyalty would hold up no matter how distant or careless he became. But it doesn't work that way. You are strong, yes, but even the strongest hearts have limits. At some point, you stopped talking, you stopped reaching out, you stopped explaining how much you were hurting, and that's when everything shifted. Because silence isn't always passive. It's often the loudest declaration of all. It's what happens when someone has said everything they could and realized it still wasn't enough to be heard. Now, the silence is speaking for you. It's showing up in places where your voice used to be. He picks up his phone and there's no message. He goes through something tough, and the person who used to always be there to talk him through it is gone. He has a win, and it feels emptier than it should, because you're not there to celebrate with him. It's not just about you being gone. It's about the sudden emptiness where your love used to live. And what's hitting him hardest is that you didn't leave with a dramatic exit. You didn't make a scene. You just slowly, quietly stopped showing up. And that's what's breaking him now. Because it's easy to ignore noise. It's easy to dismiss someone when they're constantly trying to be heard. But once the noise stops, Once the voice is gone, that's when people really start to listen. Only now there's nothing left to hear. He's learning, far too late, that silence isn't the absence of love. It's the aftermath of its neglect. It's what's left behind when someone has given all they could and finally walked away. It's not cruel. It's not cold. It's clarity. And in that clarity, he's finally starting to understand just how much space you held in his life, how much comfort your words gave him, how many cracks in his world you quietly filled without ever asking for credit. But now the silence is his. It's the echo of every moment he dismissed, every conversation he avoided, every opportunity he had to show up and didn't. And no matter how many distractions he fills his life with, there will always be moments, late at night, in the quiet, in between the noise, where the silence reminds him of you, not just of your presence, but of what it meant, and what he lost when he stopped listening. Growth is rarely comfortable. In fact, it often begins in the exact moment someone feels the consequences of their own choices. That's where he is now, sitting in the discomfort of losing you, not fully understanding how much you meant until your absence became the lesson he couldn't ignore. When someone takes a loyal heart for granted, they don't immediately feel the impact. At first, it feels like freedom, like space, like control. But over time, that space becomes emptiness, and that freedom starts to look a lot like loneliness. And that's when the growing begins. He's starting to understand things he never saw clearly before. In love isn't just about the good moments. It's not about how great things feel when they're easy. It's about how people show up when things get hard. And you always showed up. You stayed through the rough patches, the confusion, the distance, even when he gave you every reason to let go. But instead of valuing that, he got comfortable in it. He mistook your patience for permanence. He believed your forgiveness was endless. And now, without you, he's being forced to see just how much effort real love actually takes. What makes regret sting even more is the clarity that follows. The silence, the distance, the finality. It creates space for reflection. And in that reflection, he's starting to grow, whether he wants to or not. Because pain pushes people into places comfort never could. When everything feels safe, when someone else is holding the emotional weight, there's no urgency to change. There's no reason to step up. But when that safety is stripped away, and the emotional anchor is gone, the reality hits gone. He didn't just lose someone who loved him. He lost someone who held him together when he couldn't hold himself. Now, every emotion he avoided, every moment he brushed off, every sign he ignored is coming back, and it's loud. That discomfort. It's not just sadness. It's shame. It's the realization that someone gave him a kind of love most people search a lifetime for, and he couldn't meet it. That's not easy to sit with, but it's necessary, because that pain, that deep, aching sense of loss, it's trying to wake him up. Maybe for the first time, he's beginning to understand that love isn't passive. It's not something you can expect without effort. It's a daily choice, and one he stopped making. You gave him your best when he was offering you his bare minimum. And now that he's lost that stability, he's starting to feel how fragile his foundation really was. There's no one there now to catch the emotional weight he used to offload on you. No one to affirm his worth when he doubts himself. No one who truly knows him the way you did. It's painful, but it's transformative. Because growth, real growth, doesn't happen when everything's good. It happens in the mess. It happens in the reflection. It happens when a person is finally uncomfortable enough to look in the mirror and take accountability. He's feeling that now. Not because you're punishing him, not because you want him to suffer, but because life has a way of forcing people to see the truth they've spent too long avoiding. He may have thought he could live without your love, but now he's learning that living without you means facing the version of himself that let you go. And in that space, in that brokenness, growth begins. Not because he chose it, but because your absence demanded it. Closure is one of those things people often think they'll get from someone else. From a final conversation, a heartfelt apology, or some explanation that suddenly makes all the pain make sense. But real closure, the kind that actually brings peace, it doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes from the clarity you gain when you finally stop waiting for that moment. That's what this is about. He's sitting in regret now, realizing the depth of what he lost. But you're finding your closure in something far more powerful than his remorse. You're finding it in the truth. The truth is, you gave everything you had to someone who didn't protect it. You loved fully, stayed loyal, tried harder than most would, and still ended up hurt. And for a long time, maybe you thought if he could just say the right thing, if he could just finally see what he did, you'd feel better. But that's not how healing works. Because the person who broke you will never be able to give you what they couldn't offer when it actually mattered. Their regret may be real. Their pain may be honest. But that doesn't mean it holds the key to your healing. That's what you're beginning to understand now. You don't need his confession to validate what you went through. You don't need his guilt to prove your love was real. The fact that he regrets it now only confirms what you already knew, that your heart was worth protecting, and he didn't do it. That's where your power comes from. Not from his apology, but from the realization that you were never the one who got it wrong. You showed up, you stayed loyal, you tried, and now you've walked away, not because you stopped loving him, but because you started loving yourself more. Meanwhile, he's learning a different kind of lesson. He's learning that losing someone like you isn't something you just move on from, because you weren't ordinary. You weren't just nice or kind, loving. You were consistent. You were real. You were the person he could count on, even when he didn't deserve it. And now that you're gone, there's a silence in his life where your presence used to be. A stillness that isn't peaceful, but haunting. That's his version of closure. The constant reminder that he had something good and let it go. And here's the irony. He may finally understand everything now. He may finally be the version of himself that could have appreciated you. But it's too late. Because sometimes people don't change until after the damage is done. And that change, it's not your responsibility to wait for. You gave him your time, your patience, your heart. And now you get to walk away with the clarity that none of it was wasted, because you stayed true to yourself. Closure, real closure, is knowing you did your best. It's knowing you loved with depth and showed up with honesty, even when it wasn't returned. It's knowing that his regret, while real, isn't your burden to carry. He's the one who has to live with the consequences. He's the one who has to sit in the space you used to fill and wonder why he didn't do more. That's not your responsibility anymore. That's not your story to fix. You didn't get closure from him. You gave it to yourself. You stopped chasing an ending and started rewriting the beginning of something new. Not because he finally woke up, but because you did. And that realization, that's the closure that lasts. You don't have to carry the weight of his regret. That's his journey now, not yours. He broke something sacred, and now he has to sit with the truth of what he let go. But you walked away with your integrity intact. You stayed loyal to the very end, and when it was no longer safe to love him, you finally chose yourself. His regret may be loud now, but your peace will be louder. Because healing isn't about going back, it's about stepping forward, with more clarity, more strength, and more love for yourself than ever before. You were the light, you were the loyal heart, and in the end, it wasn't your loss, it was his. And that is what's breaking him now.